Bow to your sensei. Bow to your sensei! Okay.
There should be some consideration of the type of person you should choose to help prepare you for a violent encounter. Perhaps the best way to red flag martial art instructors are by the types of individuals that they are. For example, the thug.
I want you to be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Perhaps the thug title is a little harsh, but I use this to describe those that prepare people to deal with violent encounters as taking a thug approach, as meeting fire with fire, being violent to violent people.
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
Typically, this self-defense instructor is a guy that's worked on the doors. He's seen the rough part of life. He's had lots of fights. He teaches with a no-nonsense approach. He even swears in his class. He uses the reality of self-defense as his purpose for teaching people to deal with violent encounters. The academic.
I know Kung Fu.
Well, this is a teacher that overanalyzes the detail. He looks at micro movements. He looks at the problem. And then he brings it to the real world. But he doesn't necessarily always teach from experience, but sometimes from his teacher's experience. He just focuses on the theory. But then, he does suggest that he's teaching you self-defense. And then you've got the mystic, the preacher.
Before physical technique, you must learn concentration.
The guy that likes to develop his cult. He develops mantras. He develops a following. For him, teaching's much more of a social enterprise. It's about what people could do for him rather than what he can do for his students. He relies on the mystic ideas of martial arts.
Now, who'll pick up my dry cleaning?
But luckily, there aren't many of these practitioners that teach martial arts. The fighter.
The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
I've said this before, the best fighters don't always make the best teachers. You have to be single-minded to be a good fighter. Fighters have a competitive edge. Being competitive detracts from the focus of teaching students, especially if you're competitive with your students. The other problem is that fighters often lack empathy for their students.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
They don't understand why students struggle, why they can't get certain techniques, why they can't push through the hard time, why they struggle with their fitness. It's often the case that someone that's more focused on competing themselves will naturally focus on their own ability. This is the instructor that spends most of his time sparring with the students rather than coaching the students. He's the guy that's actually sparring with the students, but not necessarily sparring to improve their ability, but sparring because he's remaining competitive with them.
I have had enough of you!
He's the guy that, if you get a submission or you land a clean punch, will suddenly up the gears, up the ante, push it up another notch. Now I think a good martial art teacher should have a balance. Should have sufficient leadership qualities. A leader sets an example by modelling appropriate behaviour.
All you have to do is follow 3 simple rules.
Leadership requires that you take care of the needs of others. You put their needs before yours. So given a typical sparring situation, you'd expect that someone that had your needs ahead of theirs would be watching the class, would be watching you rather than sparring with you and being competitive. So what's the takeaway?
Training you is like harsh journey through waterless desert.
What do you mean?
Now, if you come to martial arts to learn self-defense or to prepare yourself for a violent encounter, who you entrust to do that is important. In fact, their methods and how they help you and prepare you to deal with a violent encounter is also important. The problem in martial arts, generally, there's lots of different methods, and more importantly, there's lots of different approaches.
Dodge this.
Now, why is this important? Well, making the right choice defines whether you are properly prepared for a violent encounter. For example, those that teach theory but can't show real application to violent encounters. Instructors that don't spar or don't believe that sparring is important. You see this in many different martial arts styles. A person that is closed-minded is not the person that you can learn from, especially if they can't learn themselves because they're not setting an example of what works and what doesn't work. If an individual teacher takes the approach that my martial art is the only martial art that works, then how possibly could they help you?